A virgin was forced to have a baby with a cold millionaire, but that baby made him a new man. Before we begin this powerful story, tell us where in the world you're watching from. And if this story moves your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unforgettable love stories. This isn't just a story about a contract, it's about the kind of love that rewrites destinies. Now let's begin. Helen Hart stood frozen beneath the gray San Francisco rain inside the marble lobby of Cole Media Group, gleaming, vast, and cold. In her trembling hands was a black leather folder containing a contract that could buy her mother a chance to live, or destroy every remaining piece of herself. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows like fists from the sky. The silence in the lobby was cathedral-like, her every footstep echoing like judgment. Her fingers clutched the case tighter, as though holding on to something solid, though nothing in her life had felt solid in a long time. At 29, Helen had once dreamed of painting murals across city buildings, of color and expression replacing the silence of forgotten walls. Now, all of that was buried beneath unpaid medical bills and late-night ER visits. When the elevator opened, cold air whooshed out like breath from another world. And then he stepped out, Nathan Cole. He moved like something ancient in a man's body, descending from the top floor like he belonged to some higher or lower plane of existence. Tall, composed, intimidating. The charcoal gray suit sculpted his body like a second skin. His dark brown hair was slicked back, perfect, but it was his eyes, steel gray, sharp, unreadable, that stole Helen's breath. "Miss Hart," he greeted, his voice smooth as velvet, but laced with something metallic. "I trust you've had enough time to consider." Helen lifted her chin, forcing calm into her voice despite the chaos beneath her skin. "Yes, Mr. Cole, I've reviewed everything. $5 million upon delivery," he said, as if reciting an invoice. "You'll reside in my penthouse for the duration, medical oversight by my team. No contact post-birth, no custody, no complications." She swallowed. "So one life for another. What do you call that?" "A transaction," Nathan said. "Clean, efficient, free of sentiment." He moved closer, slow and deliberate, like a predator. The scent of cedar and frost wrapped around her, invasive and overwhelming. "I don't deal in emotions, Miss Hart. They're a weakness. I need an heir. You need money. Perfect symmetry." Helen stood her ground. "And you think I qualify? You're intelligent, healthy, aesthetically pleasing according to my physicians, and desperate enough to say yes when most would run." His bluntness was a slap, but she didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to. "You're honest, I'll give you that." "I have no patience for pretense," Nathan replied, tilting his head. "I've met dozens of women who want my name, my bed, my world. You're the first to look me in the eye, without trembling." Helen gave a bitter chuckle. "I've looked death in the face. You're not half as terrifying." Something flickered in his eyes at that, a crack in the marble, then vanished. "You'll live within my structure," he continued. "Precisely, predictably, no expectations, no illusions." Helen looked down at the papers. Her name was the only thing missing. The ink felt heavier than it should. She thought of her mother's pale face, the pain, the helplessness, the mountain of unpaid bills waiting back at their crumbling apartment. And she signed. "Welcome to your gilded cage, Miss Hart," Nathan murmured. His voice was silk, lined with steel. She looked up, and in that moment she saw something in his eyes. Something lost, something human. A sigh buried deep in a forgotten soul. And Helen knew this wasn't just a contract. This was the edge of a storm. Nathan Cole's penthouse perched atop a glass tower in downtown San Francisco. From here, Helen could see the entire glittering city, twinkling lights, the distant Golden Gate Bridge, roads weaving like glowing veins. But none of it felt free. She was trapped in a cage, lavish, sleek, comfortable, but a cage nonetheless. The apartment echoed with her footsteps. Everything was perfectly designed in cold tones, white, gray, black, sterile elegance. There were no signs anyone had ever truly lived here, just staff that appeared and disappeared like shadows. Helen's daily routine was strictly scheduled, a production process down to the minute. 6 a.m. Wake up. Blood pressure and temperature check. 7 a.m. Breakfast designed by Nathan's nutritionist. 9 a.m. Prenatal consultation with his private doctor. 10 p.m. Daily walk in the private rooftop garden. 6 p.m. Dinner. 9 p.m. Evening health monitoring. No friends, no going outside, no social media, just rules. And silence, so thick it was deafening. Helen had never imagined pregnancy could feel so utterly alone. She saw Nathan about twice a week, usually in the evenings after his workday. Their meetings were short, clinical, yet saturated with strange tension. One evening, Helen was reading in the living room when the door opened. Nathan walked in, still in his tailored suit, briefcase in hand. She looked up, surprised. He was earlier than usual. "Have you eaten?" he asked, his voice low, not as sharp as before. "I have. Chicken salad and butternut squash soup. Right on schedule," she replied, folding the book. He nodded, then walked past her into the kitchen. She expected him to call a chef or a staff member, but instead he rolled up his sleeves and opened the fridge. "What are you doing?" she asked, frowning slightly. "Making dinner," he said, as if it were obvious. "I'm hungry." "You cook?" Helen tried not to sound too shocked. Nathan didn't answer. He took out eggs, scallions, and some cheese. With practiced hands, he prepared an omelet. His movements efficient, smooth, like muscle memory. "My mother used to make this whenever I couldn't sleep," he said, eyes focused on the pan. "I haven't made it in over 10 years. Helen said nothing, letting the quiet fill the space. "Do you sleep well here?" he asked, placing a plate in front of her. She looked at him for a moment. "Since I moved in? Not really? Why?" She gave a dry smile. "Because I'm living in what feels like an art gallery where even the artist isn't allowed to touch the colors." Nathan was quiet. "You miss painting?" "Like you miss your mother." His eyes flickered again, a small, honest crack in the armor. They ate in silence. For the first time since signing the contract, Helen felt like a human being. Not a vessel, not a transaction, but Helen Hart, a woman with memories, loneliness, and something left to feel. "You can paint if you'd like," Nathan said suddenly. "I'll have a studio set up." Helen blinked, not at the offer, but at the way he said it. Less cold, almost kind. "Thank you," she replied softly. "Though I'm not sure I remember how to hold a brush." "Like riding a bike," he said. "You just need to start." She studied him more closely. For the first time, she didn't see a powerful businessman. She saw a lonely boy trapped inside a man, trying to control the world with logic, because he didn't know how to live with emotion. And in that moment, Helen knew. Beneath the ice, there was a man waiting to wake up. The days that followed passed in quiet stillness. The penthouse remained luxurious, the routine unchanged, yet Helen began to sense something shifting, not outside, but deep within. In Nathan's small gestures, in glances that no longer felt icy, in silences that no longer felt suffocating, but strangely warm. She didn't know what it was, but she could feel it. The ice was starting to crack. The autumn chill of San Francisco crept through the glass panes, curling into every corner of the penthouse. Helen lay curled on the couch, hugging a small pillow, her body sore and her mind a blur of fatigue. She was now in her 12th week of pregnancy. Morning sickness had swept through her like an unexpected storm, loud, relentless, unkind. Every smell turned her stomach, Every noise pricked at her skull. She had never felt so weak, so out of control. Nathan hadn't appeared for days. Perhaps he was busy, or perhaps he didn't care. She didn't blame him. After all, this was a transaction. She was just part of a process. But then, one rainy morning, the door to her suite opened. Nathan stepped in. No announcement, no icy stiffness. He moved quietly, almost hurriedly. He wore a charcoal turtleneck instead of his usual suit. No tie, his hair slightly tousled, as if he hadn't bothered to fix it. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. His eyes scanned her pale face, lingering on the tremble in her hands. Helen tried to sit up. I'm fine. Just nausea. The doctor said it's normal." Nathan said nothing. He moved into the kitchen, and minutes later, the scent of ginger, lemon, and mint filled the room. He returned with a warm mug and placed it gently into her hands. "Try this." Helen looked at him, surprised. "You know how to make this?" "My mother drank it every morning when she was pregnant with my brother. I remember the recipe." She took a sip. Warm, soothing. The sting in her throat eased instantly. "Thank you," she murmured. Nathan sat in the chair across from her, arms folded, gazing out the window. Silence wrapped around them, not the cold kind, but the kind that settles between two people when words aren't necessary. "Do you always have to control everything?" Helen asked softly. He turned toward her. "I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do," she said with a faint smile. "You just choose safety over pain." He was quiet for a while. Then he exhaled, like something long held was slipping through his fingers. "When I was 17, he began slowly, my parents died in a car crash. I was the one driving." Helen's gaze sharpened, but she didn't interrupt. "They had just picked me up from my first art showcase. My mother cried because she was proud. My father said my future would be brilliant." He gave a short, strangled laugh. 10 minutes later, I lost both of them." Helen said nothing. She simply listened. No pity, no judgment, just presence. After that, I swore never to let emotion lead me again. I turned everything into systems. I turned myself into a machine. He looked at her. "Until you walked in and disrupted everything." Helen smiled, soft enough to melt glaciers. "I didn't do anything." "You existed," he said. "You breathe, you feel, you don't fear me. You remind me I was once human." Oh, and in that moment, something cracked. Not glass, not hearts, but the layer of ice that had covered too much for too long. Nathan leaned forward and placed his hand over Helen's for the first time. Not because of a contract, not out of obligation, because he wanted to. And Helen didn't pull away. His skin was cool, but underneath there was warmth. A quiet, uncertain warmth that had never reached her until now. They sat like that, amid ginger and rain, the world beyond their glass walls, fading away. In that instant, they weren't Nathan Cole, the media tycoon, or Helen Hart, the woman carrying a child for money. They were simply two people, learning how to feel again. Their fragile peace shattered on a quiet Thursday night, ordinary on the surface, but hiding a storm beneath. Nathan brought Helen to a Cole Media Group charity gala, a glamorous event supporting community arts. It was her first public appearance since the contract. She wore a midnight blue dress, custom-tailored to disguise her 3-month bump, elegant but modest. Nathan stood beside her, hand gently at her back, a silent shield. Camera flashes burst like lightning. Curious eyes lingered, some admiring, some suspicious. Helen tried to smile, but something inside her tightened like a fist. Everything might have passed smoothly, until Scarlett Rowe appeared. Model, actress, Nathan's ex-lover, media royalty. She glided over, smile sweet, but eyes sharp as blades. "Nathan, it's been too long. I didn't know you had such simple tastes now." Helen stiffened. Scarlett was the kind of woman who could kill with a compliment. "She's my guest," Nathan replied coolly, his eyes steady on Helen, a silent reassurance. Scarlett smirked. "Oh, I'm sure she is. With you, everything's transactional, even your +1. The silence froze the room. Helen's face flushed. Whispering began around them. She turned and walked quickly toward the restroom, fists clenched, not from anger, but from pain. The restroom door closed behind Helen, shutting out the noise of the gala like a storm sealed behind glass. She gasped, bracing her hands against the sink, trying to steady her breath. Scarlett's words rang in her ears like a slap. "With you, everything's transactional, right? Even your +1. She knew she shouldn't care. She knew. But the heart doesn't always obey. Fingers gripping the sink, Helen shut her eyes, swallowing the rising humiliation. But instead of calming down, a sharp, searing pain sliced through her lower abdomen. "No," she whispered, clutching her belly, breath shortening. The pain twisted, brutal and deep, like knives beneath her skin. She staggered back, trying to steady herself, but her knees gave way. Warmth trickled down her thighs. She looked down. Blood. Panic crashed over her like a black wave. She reached for her phone inside her clutch, but her hands trembled too much. She dropped it onto the cold stone floor. Her vision blurred, her lungs tightening. "Nathan!" She tried to call, but her throat was burning dry. Outside, Nathan was searching for her through the crowd. He'd felt something off the moment she walked away. His eyes darted across the room, no sign at the bar, the hall, or the terrace. Dread clawed up his chest. He stormed toward the restrooms, brushing past a security guard. "She's in there." He pushed the door open. "Helen?" Silence. He stepped inside, heart pounding so loud it drowned everything else. Then he saw her. Helen was slumped against the tiled wall, legs folded under her, eyes clouded, one hand wrapped around her stomach, the other weakly clutching her dropped phone. Blood soaked through her silk dress, pooling on the cold floor. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Time stopped. Nathan rushed to her side, falling to his knees. "I'm here. Helen, look at me. Can you hear me?" She nodded faintly, tears welling in her eyes. "The baby. We're going to save the baby, I swear it." His voice broke for the first time in his life. He pulled off his coat and wrapped it around her, then scooped her into his arms. "Help! Someone call an ambulance!" The gala froze as Nathan Cole burst through the crowd, no longer the composed tycoon, but a man frantic, terrified, holding the woman who'd quietly stolen his heart. He shouted orders, panic in his eyes, sprinting out the doors like a storm unleashed. But this storm wasn't outside. It had begun in Nathan Cole's chest. Nathan nearly broke the door down at the emergency room. Helen had collapsed minutes before, pale and trembling, rushed into the OR. His heart thudded so loudly he couldn't hear anything else. "Please save her," he told the doctor. She's carrying my child." He sat outside the doors for almost an hour, motionless. Flashes of Helen's face swirled through his mind, her sipping ginger tea on the couch, her soft smile when she talked about painting, the calm yet endless depth in her eyes. He had never known anyone like her, strong yet tender, broken yet gentle. And he realized it wasn't about the baby anymore. He loved her. He had loved her for a while now. The hospital room was silent and washed in white. Only the steady beep of the heart monitor broke the stillness, a gentle reminder that everything was okay, that life was still quietly growing inside Helen. She lay on her side, tired but peaceful. Her hands rested gently on her stomach, as if guarding the most precious thing she'd ever known. Nathan sat at the edge of the bed, his fingers laced with hers. He hadn't let go for a single minute since they arrived. His face no longer wore its usual mask of steel. It had softened, as if the life or death moment had melted every wall he'd ever built. "The baby's okay," she whispered, tears glimmering in her eyes. "I was so scared." He bent forward and kissed the back of her hand. "So was I. I thought I'd lost you. Lost everything." A silence settled over them, soft as a lullaby. Then Nathan stood, slowly walked to the window, and pulled the curtain aside. Autumn sunlight spilled into the room, gentle and golden. The breeze rustled the white drapes, making the air feel strangely peaceful. He turned around, his eyes deep and almost trembling. "Helen." She looked at him, waiting. He stepped closer and dropped to one knee. No longer a powerful man, no longer the controller of everything, but a man learning to love, terrified of losing the one thing that made his world make sense. "I never thought I'd say this, but I can't let you go." From his pocket, he pulled a small velvet box, simple, unglamorous, yet enough to steal her breath. "No more contracts, no conditions, no pretending. Just me and you, a real family." He opened the box. Inside was a thin ring engraved with her name in delicate script. Elegant, personal, just like her. "Please, marry me." Helen stared at him for a long moment, tears spilling down her cheeks, not just from emotion, but from the overwhelming realization that what she once thought impossible was now here, in front of her. She covered her mouth with one hand, then nodded, slowly, surely. "Yes?" Nathan exhaled, like he'd been given a second chance at life. He slipped the ring onto her finger and pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle as if she were the whole world. "Family," she whispered. "Family," he repeated, placing his hand over her belly. And for the first time, everything felt possible. But life wasn't done testing them yet. They thought the storm had passed, that the hospital room proposal marked the beginning of a new chapter, where love could be enough to heal every wound. But life, especially when tied to a name like Nathan Cole, was never that simple. The real storm was only just beginning. The news exploded 2 weeks after Helen left the hospital. Every major headline screamed across screens like a wound torn open. CEO Nathan Cole in surrogacy scandal, love or transaction. The woman carrying the media tycoon's child, truth revealed. Attached were leaked images of an email outlining the contract between Nathan and Helen. The financial terms were omitted, but the title alone was enough to ignite a wildfire. Helen sat frozen in front of her laptop. Her fingers clutched the rim of a ceramic mug, white-knuckled. She knew this day would come, but she never thought it would hit this fast, or this hard. The door opened. Nathan entered, his face tense, but his eyes went straight to her. "International media. A former competitor bribed a senior assistant," he said, voice flat, but she could hear the storm beneath it. "I'm sorry," Helen whispered. "This is all because of me." "No." Nathan's reply was sharp, immediate. "Don't you dare say that." He sat beside her, his hand instinctively resting on her belly. "I chose this. I chose you." A knock on the door. Elliot Mason, chairman of the board, stepped in. Stern. No small talk. "Nathan, we need an emergency meeting. The board wants you to step down. Temporarily, if you want to protect the company's image. Unless you're prepared to deny the relationship." Helen looked up. The air thickened instantly. Deny it, deny her, deny the baby. Nathan stood slowly. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. He didn't look at Elliot. He looked at Helen, only her, his eyes no longer stone, but wind after rain. "I don't need time to think," he said. Elliot frowned. "Nathan, you can't." "No," Nathan cut him off. "I can't not choose her. I can rebuild an empire. I can't rebuild Helen. Because without her, there would be nothing left worth building." He turned to Helen, voice softer now. I spent my life chasing power, thinking it would fill the hole inside me. Then you came, and I realized the only thing that ever made me feel full is family." He turned back to Elliot, voice steel. "I resign." Within 2 hours, the news of Nathan Cole stepping down spread like wildfire. The world split in two, some criticizing, some applauding. Nathan didn't care. He brought Helen home to her tiny apartment where paint still stained the floor, half-finished murals leaned against the wall, and warm afternoon light spilled through the windows. She watched him fumble in the kitchen, surrounded by brushes and sketches, so out of place, yet so completely hers. "Are you sure?" she asked, hand gently on his back. "Giving up everything? Just for me?" He turned, smiling, truly smiling for the first time. "Not for you." "For us?" Outside, wind swept through the city, rattling loose sketch pages. On the table lay Helen's plan for a free art class for children with cancer, an idea now ready to become real. In the middle of media chaos, in a world always chasing profit, they had found each other. No longer strangers, no longer a contract, but a family slowly being written in love. That afternoon, San Francisco seemed to slow down by one heartbeat. Wind swept through the skyline, scattering newspapers that bore the face of Nathan Cole, the media king turned man who gave it all up for love. Inside the tiny apartment, Helen was painting, gentle strokes matching her mood, calm, content, as if the storm had passed. Then a sharp pain stabbed through her lower abdomen. She gasped, collapsing slightly, gripping the edge of the table. "No, not now," she whispered. 7 months. It was too early. Nathan rushed out of his office at the sound of her cry and saw her, pale and trembling. "You're in pain?" He rushed to her side. Helen nodded, eyes glossy with tears. I think it's labor." Nathan didn't waste a second. He dropped to his knees and lifted her into his arms, holding her close like she might break. Sweat gathered on his forehead as he carried her down the stairs, never loosening his grip. But outside, chaos awaited. Dozens of reporters, cameras, lenses, microphones, all aimed at them like weapons. "Helen, did he force you to sign that contract?" "Nathan, how much did you pay her to stay silent? Is this love or a publicity stunt?" Helen curled into him, trembling. Nathan said nothing. He lowered his head and shielded her, pushing forward through the crowd. Security couldn't keep up. Helen whimpered, pain coursing through her body. "Nathan, I don't feel right." "I know. Just hold on. We're almost there," he said through clenched teeth. He placed her in the car like glass, then jumped into the driver's seat. Under a veil of mist and flashing camera lights, the car sped off, leaving behind unanswered questions. The ride to the hospital took less than 9 minutes. Helen clung to his hand the entire time, her body shaking, cold sweat dripping from her forehead. Each contraction hit harder than the last. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere," Nathan whispered, eyes locked on the road. When they arrived, nurses were already waiting, thanks to a frantic emergency call earlier. Nathan carried Helen into the ER, shirt soaked, arms shaking. "She's 7 months pregnant, sharp abdominal pain, signs of early labor," he shouted. A nurse touched his shoulder gently. "You can't go in." He hesitated, eyes locked on Helen. She reached for him, barely conscious. "I'm scared," she whispered. He bent down and pressed his forehead to hers. "So am I, but you're not alone." She nodded faintly, and then the doors closed. Nathan stood there, alone, in a sterile white corridor, surrounded by machines, alarms, and the pounding of his own heart. The media storm might still rage outside, but this moment, this was the real storm, the fight for a life not yet born. That night, after hours of waiting, the first cry pierced through every fear. It wasn't just the birth of a child, it was the moment love, trust, and family were born again. From that moment on, they no longer lived in contracts or broken pasts, but in the present, where love needed no conditions, where a new life had truly begun. 3 months later, sunrise in San Francisco no longer felt as cold. Or maybe it was because inside the tiny third-floor apartment where Helen and Nathan now lived, there was always warmth, of laughter, of oil paint, and of a small, sleeping soul. Helen cradled their daughter, gently swaying, humming a lullaby beneath the morning light. Beside her, Nathan sat reading, glancing up every now and then at the two of them, his eyes filled with something that had never existed in his perfectly controlled world: peace. They named her Lyra, a name meaning a small light in the night sky. Helen said it represented the miracle that had happened in the middle of their storm, a spark of hope in the dark. And it truly was. After the hospital night, Nathan officially stepped down from his company. No press release, no fight for control, no desire to reclaim what he lost. Instead, he started the Lyra Foundation, a charity supporting children with cancer who had artistic talent. Because, he said, even in the most painful places, there deserves to be color. Helen returned to her paintings, not to survive, but to truly live. She opened a small studio class, free art sessions for sick children and for adults who needed healing no one could see. Every morning, Nathan would brew coffee, play with Lyra, then drive Helen to her class. And each afternoon, she'd welcome him back with a smile and the smell of paint on her sleeves. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was life. Their wedding was quiet. No designer dresses, no luxury venues, no flashing press. Just a soft autumn afternoon in the backyard of Helen's studio with strings of warm lights hanging from the rails, paintings by her students along the walls, and a friend playing gentle guitar. Helen wore a simple white dress, her hair loose, Lyra in her arms as she walked down the aisle. Nathan never took his eyes off her. When the officiant asked, "Do you promise to love this woman, not out of condition, but simply because she is who she is?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Helen for a long time, as if seeing the most beautiful thing in his life for the very first time. Then he smiled and said, "Not a promise, just what I already do and always will." Helen laughed through her tears, and their story, which began in limits and contracts, ended with a promise that needed no paper. That evening, after the guests had gone, Helen sat on the balcony. Lyra slept peacefully in her cradle. Nathan wrapped his arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "I'm thinking," he whispered, "if you hadn't signed that contract, maybe my life would never have started." Helen turned toward him. "And if you hadn't broken down that perfect armor, I would never have believed love was real." The autumn wind brushed gently past. Beneath golden string lights they kissed, not because it was a wedding, not because it was an ending, but because it was a beginning they had bled and healed for. A family, a story, a life not born from perfection, but from truth. And in the cradle beside them, little Lyra stirred, the soft light they had almost lost, now burning brighter than ever. From a cold transaction to a family built on love, from silence and walls to a home filled with laughter and tiny footsteps. Helen and Nathan's story reminds us, sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. What did this story make you feel? Tell us in the comments. We read every word. Don't forget to like this video if it touched your heart. Subscribe to the channel for more stories where love always finds a way. And remember, even in the darkest storms, love can still be the light.